Hey everyone, how's it going? Rob here, Moto Lab, dirtbikes.com. One of the first things when it comes to reinstalling your forks is to make sure that your fasteners are lubricated. If you ever have experienced any other important critical torque specs, let's say for example, torquing the head bolts on an engine of anything, they always say make sure the threads are lubricated. If you remove these bolts and they squeak and squawk and make noise, reinstall them dry, you'll never get the proper torque. And it's very sensitive. If you over tighten these, it'll create a bottleneck. And when the fork tries to pass through there, fork bushing rather, on the inside, it'll create a friction zone and it'll actually catch and catch pass. Not good. So we're just going to go over some of the highlights of reinstalling your forks in. That starts with go ahead and remove your bolts. They're going to be dry. So what you could do is take either straight anti-seize or an anti-seize grease mixture and a small brush, and a little bit goes a long way. Do not cover these. There's no sense in covering them. Do not use Loctite on these. All you need is just about the first centimeter or so, 10 to 12 millimeters. That's all you need to do. That's all it needs. Literally just go ahead and apply that, and then we're going to do this for all 8. All right, now that we've got all the triple clamp bolts slathered up with a little bit of anti-seize, we're going to go ahead and slide the fork legs in. Just make sure, it's very important that this surface is clean, and if you need to, take a Scotch-Brite pad, a little bit of simple green or some soapy water, and scrub that out. It's very common that dirt will get in there, and what happens is it's not a flat clamping surface, and so what will happen is it'll cause the forks to roll or twist in there very much easier than a clean one. So if you need to, you can even use a little light 600 or 800 grit sandpaper or some soapy water as well if you really got one that's pretty bad. So we're just going to grab our right side fork leg. If you have a pull strap, remember to do that. Slide that on. And then what we'll do is, if you turn it clockwise, that definitely helps. Not so much on these billet aluminum ones, the ones that are machined, but the ones that have are forged. They're going to be a little bit more difficult to get in there. And you want to put your blade screw up towards the front of the motorcycle, second line flush with the top. That's your standard setting there. What we're going to do is go ahead and temporarily tighten those, and we're going to come back and hit them with the torque wrench last. So let's go ahead and slip in this other leg. Same thing here. Nothing really new. Just make sure you slip our little tug strap there. Get it in place. If it's giving you a little bit of a fit, just go ahead and just use 2 hands, and you can either twist it fully clockwise or just rock it back and forth. So now that we got that set, second line flush with the top, let's go ahead and do the same thing. I know my impact very well. I use this thing all day, every day. Has multiple settings on here, so I would advise just, your everyday average Joe, start all these by hand. Use hand tools. Never ever start any bolts, completely out of the hole and then zing them in. And this is all just lightly. And I always know that I torque at the spec, so just a heads up there. All right, I'm just going to move on to the fork guards here. Pretty simple stuff. Same thing. I always start these by hand. And I definitely recommend you do the same too. So you could just grab a socket. There's sockets that have magnets inside too, which are really handy for stuff like this. So let's go ahead and start all that stuff by hand. And we're going to repeat for the other 5. All right, so after we've got our fork guard bolts all tightened up, it's going to move on to the axle here. And same thing, it just only needs a very light coat. And I do a anti-seize and grease combo with a little brush. So When you're only doing this on really any bike, we'll reiterate in the manual too, do not do this surface here. This is the surface that slides inside that axle clamp right there. You do not want to grease this, just, apply the grease across here. So what I personally do is I just leave the caliper off. You can do however you want. You want to spread the brake pads, hold it down, and then put the wheel on, that's fine. Do that. I find it's way easier just to set the wheel up. You don't have that restriction of the caliper in the way. And so just wheel this thing on. And what we'll do is get ready to slide our axle in. So hopefully you have a lift that cooperates and makes it a lot easier for you. But we'll go ahead and slide that in. Make sure we line it up on this side. And it should slide in easy like that. So if it doesn't slide in easy like that, or you've got an older model where I've seen some extreme over tightening and abuse where this gap is almost non-existent, you can take and use a flat blade screwdriver or something and go ahead, make sure that the bolts are out plenty far and then tap that guy down in there. This way you can spread yourself a little bit opening so that the axle will slide in, but it should just go in nice and easy like that. And if you have to, you can come and wiggle this fork tube with your hand to get it to slide in nice and easy. So what we'll do is just temporarily put our axle nut on there, bolt rather. And with this one here, so we got the power parts, disc cover here. So we want to, before we go ahead and tighten anything, we want to kind of line things up and then slide our caliper down over there. So if you need to, you could spread the pads. Generally, if the lever hasn't been depressed, it'll slide in just like that. Make sure that when you do reinstall your caliper bolts that you're using some type of thread locking agent. So yeah, you do not want those coming off. So we'll go ahead and throw that on. Same thing. And it's nice to, before you tighten it, to line the stuff up, especially because this one has a through hole for caliper bolt. So I'll come back and torque these and just getting those temporarily installed. And so now we're good to go there. Keep that hole lined up if we want to. What we're going to do is come over here and just temporarily tighten the right non-brake side axle. And what that's going to do is keep the axle from spinning while we tighten our nut. So sometimes you just can get away with only tightening one if you want. Always make sure you consult your manual, look up your torque specs on here, and then tighten it to spec. There we go. So now that that's tight over here, we'll double check our caliper here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and just go ahead and tighten that guy. What we'll do is come back over here and loosen that up. And this is one of the most important steps. You want to make sure that this this fork leg floats on that axle. See how easy it is to press that? What you're wanting to do is just make sure the forks are parallel. If you were to leave this clamp tight and draw that nut in, it would pull the forks out of parallel, which would be really create a bunch of harsh, unpredictable type handling feeling. So we see this is very, very common that happens. It just gets tightened in the wrong sequence. So at this point, if you like, you could reach up on the handlebar and just compress the forks a couple times. What we're doing is just, we want it to just find its home or relaxed position. So if, like I said, if it's bound up, it's big trouble. So let's go ahead. We're good there, and we're just going to go ahead and give her a little zing zing there, and then come back around and use our torque wrench. Double check that, make sure we're good there, and then come around here, do the same on this side. And we'll do our caliper bolts too. We're not done yet. One more thing down here while we're down here. If you got a little speed sensor, go ahead and make sure you replace that zip tie. You don't want that thing being caught by the weeds or whatever is trying to reach out and touch that thing, because it will happen. So go ahead and finish that. Now, one of the last most critical steps here is just double checking your torque. Like I said, always check your manual. KTM makes it easy. They actually just engrave it right on top. So literally on the top of either surface there, it'll tell you 17 newton meters and 12 newton meters on this. So we'll just go ahead, set 17, and then go ahead and torque both top triple clamp bolts. Make sure we're good there. Come over to this side, same thing. And dial her back to 12 for the lower ones. And that's not very much torque, and that's why it's important, that the surfaces are clean on there, that you don't have any boogers on the inside of there that will cause the forks to slip. And then remember, anytime you have a crash or tip over, that's going to twist your forks and your triple clamps. So what you'd want to do then is loosen all 4 lower triple clamp bolts in your right non-brake side, and then you kind of jounce the front end, hold your front brake in or pull down to go ahead and reset your front end there. And you could even double check this. And here's something I would encourage. If you've made it this far without your ADD going off into another internet video, this is really something, it is a good takeaway. So if you're never sure, you're like, I don't know, everything's tight, but I just want to double check. Go ahead and pull that out. And if it didn't jerk in or out or move, then you'd know you've done it correctly. And you can even go ahead and give it one more bounce if that's going to help you sleep better at night. Do a little temporary tighten. Make sure we're back up to the correct torque spec on these guys. And go ahead and finish it off. Just like that. And don't forget, pump that front brake if you spread those pads. But that's it. Real simple and easy. Couple really good takeaways here. Lube the threads. Make sure the surfaces are clean. Come back and double check that thing last. Make sure those brake caliper bolts are tight. So, hey, thanks for joining us. Shoot us a call or email if you got any questions. Check us out for more at MotoLabDirtBikes.com. Thanks again.